In today's video, we'll discuss a serious warning issued by Russia, which stated that if European nations send a peacekeeping force to Ukraine, Moscow would feel justified in using nuclear weapons against those troops, a move that could potentially plunge the world into World War III. On Thursday, April 24th, Sergei Shoigu, Russia's former defense minister and now secretary of the influential Security Council, issued stern warnings to the West. Among them, he emphasized that any attempt to deploy Western troops on Ukrainian soil could trigger a global-scale war. Shoigu specifically criticized a British proposal, reportedly linked to Prime Minister Keir Starmer, to form a coalition of the willing. He described this European force not as a peacekeeping mission, but as an occupying and interventionist army. Shoigu reiterated Russia's stance that NATO's military presence in Ukraine is a core reason behind the ongoing conflict. He argued that sending European soldiers under the guise of a peacekeeping mission would be a direct provocation. He pointedly asked whether these so-called blue helmets would come from the same NATO countries whose presence Moscow had opposed even before the war began. Shoigu went further, warning that Moscow is prepared not only to use nuclear weapons if deemed necessary, but also to resume nuclear testing in the Arctic, something not seen since the Cold War. According to Shoigu, a quiet arms race is already underway in Europe, with behind-the-scenes discussions about timelines. Analysts suggest that within 3 to 5 years, Europe could be militarily ready for a direct confrontation with Russia. He also highlighted pre-war British involvement in Ukraine, such as the construction of a naval base in Ochakiv in the Mykolaiv region. Shoigu claimed this base was not just for defensive purposes, but was used to train Ukrainian special forces and to conduct attacks against Russia. And now, Shoigu asked, would these same soldiers return under the guise of peacekeepers? What exactly would these troops be protecting? Russia's rhetoric has intensified. Shoigu asserted that any aggression, whether against Russian territory or against its strategic ally Belarus, could justify the use of nuclear weapons. He also claimed that Europe lacks the financial capacity to sustain Ukraine's war effort alone, both economically and in terms of arms production. According to Shoigu, European political and military leaders are aiming to be ready for an armed conflict with Russia by 2030. He argued this justifies Russia's recent deployment of nuclear weapons in Belarus as part of a strategic deterrence strategy. Even with Donald Trump's return to the center of negotiations, Shoigu remains skeptical. The former defense minister stated that Moscow is open to dialogue, but only concrete actions, not political statements, will show whether the United States is genuinely willing to address the deeper issues straining relations between the two powers. The topic of nuclear tests remains especially sensitive. The last Soviet test was conducted in 1990 in the Arctic archipelago of Novaya Zemlya. Since then, Russia has observed a unilateral moratorium. However, Shoigu warned that if the United States resumes its own tests, potentially due to aging warheads or new weapons development, Russia might follow suit. This threatening rhetoric highlights how Russia perceives the deployment of European peacekeeping forces in Ukraine as a threat to any potential ceasefire. In essence, it suggests that Russia's goal may not be lasting peace, but rather a temporary pause to rearm and resume attacks later. To add fuel to the fire, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev threatened any country that enforces the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant against Vladimir Putin. Medvedev claimed that carrying out this warrant could be seen as an act of war, especially against a nuclear power and permanent member of the UN Security Council. These statements point to a dangerous escalation in rhetoric, reigniting fears of a new nuclear era. But beyond words, the current landscape is marked by strategic maneuvers, military repositioning, and deepening distrust between East and West, a situation that could spiral into a catastrophic global conflict. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to do so and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.